Thank you very much. Mr. Thapar, Mr. Goenka, Ms. Rekha Sethi, members of the IMA, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. So the topic given to me this morning is courage in uncertainty. But I think we should have courage even in the most certain times. I'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about what's happening generally, and I'm sure you heard other speakers yesterday, and you will hear more this morning and this afternoon. Well, this audience that I'm speaking to today is a very well-aware audience. All of you know exactly where we are today in terms of our economy, where India is positioned, what needs to be done, and I'm sure you all are brimming with ideas on how best to fix the situation at hand. When I say fix the situation, I say this with a sense of reality, that today we are growing at between 4 to 5%, perhaps 0.5 plus or minus, but generally speaking, the last 18 months have been slower growth than expected. Again, the key word is expected. If the US economy grows at 1%, the base is so large that it's a phenomenal growth for them. And the European economies are struggling to get positive growth. When India grows at 8.5%, it's expected to grow at 8.5%. The potential for the economy is perhaps more than that. Where does the word potential come from? It's expectations from the people of this country and the global community. Because we have the talent source, we have the engines of growth, the capacities to absorb that kind of growth, the consumptive capacity, the productive capacity. So when India grows at 4 or 5%, everybody, all the rating agencies, the World Bank, all the pink press, the entire world says, not good enough. Sure, not good enough. But what needs to be done to fix this growth of GDP, the forward momentum, that is what we have to take into account. The first thing we've done as a government in the last 6 months or so is to reduce the current account deficit. And I think the finance minister has done a great job in pulling back the current account deficit to the target that he set for us as 4.8%. I think we've done a little bit better than the 4.8% target we set out for ourselves. But it's not just about cutting expenses. It's about incentivizing small and medium enterprises. It's about giving confidence to the large investor. And I say this in many places that it's okay for the Indian economy, for all of us to have expectations from FDI, from foreign investors. But what we must first do is to give courage and confidence to our own investors, our own Indian corporate leaders. If the Indian industry is not plowing back its profits and revenues into the economy, why must we expect others from overseas to come and invest in our country? So we need to fix that problem today, which is to infuse confidence, reduce the hurdles and the bottlenecks. And I think the Cabinet Committee on Investment has done a fair amount of detailing in that regard, whereas to clear the last mile hurdles that have always plagued some of the large investments that we read about and talk about. The fiscal and monetary steps taken to find the right value for the rupee versus the dollar, the kind of fascination with buying gold, all these things come into the fore only when there are other question marks raised. I know 3 years ago, no one talked about the appetite for gold. No one worried about the US exchange rate to the dollar, to the rupee. It's because we were growing at 8%. And what must we do to get back to that growth trajectory? There are 2 or 3 things I think I and my ministry have been trying to do. One, as Gautam mentioned to you, is that we've been able to create a new law for companies. Now, the last time we passed the law was 1956. And since then, we have amended the law 25 times. But the need was felt to rewrite the companies law so that the Indian corporate legislative environment and our regulations are in compliance with what's happening around the world. 60 years is too long a time period for us to be complying with laws made at that time. The world has changed, India has moved ahead, the world has moved forward, and we needed to make our laws and legislation compliant to what's happening around the world, because the world expects the Indian laws to be 21st century's laws, to be forward-looking law. And I think this particular piece of legislation is a very forward-looking, reform-oriented piece of legislation. It took us a long time to get it through Parliament. And when I say long time, I mean long time. I'm talking at 11, 10 years it took for this bill to float around the various standing committees and recommendations, etc. The lower house of parliament gave its consent in December last year. And it still took us 8 to 9 months to get it to the Rajya Sabha. And then it took everything I had, and we had to get the bill passed in Rajya Sabha. And I remember when the naysayers and the pessimists amongst us were saying that this bill is never going to see the light of day. Many before me have been in this ministry, have stayed and gone, but the bill did not get through Parliament. I said to myself, I said, if I've been given this job, I must try and get and push this bill. And I have to thank all the political parties. And I say this because the Indian Parliament has more than 40 parties. And you know how, all of you see it, how easy it is to disrupt any proceedings when they want to get disrupted. But it took some consensus building, it took some reaching out, it took some talking to the opposition leaders, to our own allies, our supporters, all the members of Parliament from various political parties. And it is because that we were able to build that consensus and convince the political leadership of all parties that this bill is going to help the Indian economy. It is going to help us go out to the world with a new face to say that we have a new legislative landscape where investments will be welcomed, where people's companies' lives will be made easier. So that consensus was made, and we were able to push the bill through Rajya Sabha. Well, then when the upper house gave its consent, then some amongst us said, well, now the Rashtrapati won't sign on this bill. It is going to be pending for months together. Well, as luck would have it, the Honorable President of India gave his consent to the bill, and we have now notified some sections of the Act. Now, I will speak about it because I think some clarity needs to be shed on issues that Mr. Thapar raised and some other technical issues so that there is no ambiguity on how we are going about enacting that bill that has now become law. Friends, the new company bill that has now become law, the intent of that legislation is to really ensure that we have a competitive, level playing field for all companies. As you know, there are about 800,000 companies active in India. And we have to make our legislation and our investment climate more accepting, more welcoming. Issues of e-governance, issues of video conferencing, electronic voting, all of them have now become law because we felt that this is the technology and this must be incorporated in our legislations. Good corporate governance. Good corporate governance cannot be mandated by law. It's my understanding that it has to be done by the corporate leadership. It can't be done through the middle management or some government order. It has to be done by demonstrating it right from the top, and that responsibility lies collectively with the Indian corporate sector. This act talks a lot about self-disclosures, self-reporting, more transparency, giving rights to minority shareholders. For the first time, we talked about class action suits. We've also talked about how we are going to mitigate the timelines. In India, it is often said that you can open a company if you want to, but you cannot shut down a company for love or money. It'll take you years to close a company down because it has to go to high courts, etc., etc. We have looked at that problem, and we're trying to address it by transforming the company law board into a tribunal, which was not just going to be a change in the name, but we're also reducing the pendency in the High Court by having the National Company Law Tribunal look at all the winding up petitions, all the closing down of companies, of mergers and acquisitions, cross-border mergers and acquisitions. The BIFR will then be part of the NCLT. So all those issues which take a long time in the judicial process by getting High Court permissions and NOCs and so on and so forth, all of that will be reduced, and the NCLT will then be able to take quick action, quick decisions for winding up, for mergers, etc. That's a good positive step. The new concept of one-person company. In India, the law today is, or has been, that you need 2 people to start a company. And my mind goes out to people who work as proprietors or as individuals, as weavers, artisans, or masons, or a shopkeeper. Any person who wants to do business on his own or on her own, that person should have the legal sanctity of having an incorporation. So the one-person company is a new concept where millions of people, hopefully in smaller towns and cities, will be able to take advantage of being an incorporated entity by getting credit facilities, market access, legal safety, without having to do the kinds of compliances that are required for a normal company. Again, it's a very innovative, new concept, new idea, and the jury is out on how it will shape out, but we've done this keeping in mind all those people who want to be a part of the formal economy, who want to be a part of the corporate sector, without really having the resources or the muscle or the time or the capacity to do all the compliances that are required for a regular company. So the one-person company hopefully will be something that's going to help all individuals who want to become companies without having the trouble of all the compliance that we mandated for other companies. This act also mandates a certain class of companies to have at least one woman as a director on the board. Now, I've been criticized for that. They said, why should you force people to choose between gender? But I'm happy to accept all the criticism and all the flack, but still stand up for the womankind and say that women who worked in the corporate sector need recognition. They don't need a help and charity, but need recognition. And the counterpoint is that you can have more than one woman if you want, but at least one woman you must have, even call it symbolism, call it tokenism, but yes, we must have gender parity and gender sensitivity when we talk about composition on the boards. Independent directors. A lot of questions were asked of me as to why are you mandating independent directors on companies. Well, I think it's good to have objective views on the board. We are limiting the responsibilities and the liability of the independent director, because we want good individuals with a lot of wisdom and experience to come and give their views on the board, so that there is a objective, unbiased view on the board. And this is only for certain class of companies. It is not going to be for all companies. SEBI has mandated 50% independent directors for its listed companies, but we are getting inputs from the corporate sector, from everybody, to see what sort of companies should have 1/3 of their directors as independent directors. And friends, I'd like to also point out that the bill as passed in Parliament is a very large document. It has many facets to it. It's a very technical, very bulky sort of a piece of legislation. And it has a lot of rule making that has to be done by the ministry. But I want to reassure all of you that while the government and the ministry notifies the sections and while we make the rules, it is not going to be done purely as a bureaucratic exercise with some officers and the minister deciding what the rules will be, what the benchmarks will be, how the execution of the act will happen, because the devil is in the detail. And the rule making is a very, very important exercise that we have to do. But I have constituted a committee within the ministry, that is the rule making committee. And the rule making committee has members from all the chambers of commerce, whether it's FICCI or CII or NASSCOM or ASSOCHAM or NGOs, audit communities. All of those people, I think 17 of them, are all members of the rule making committee. And we only have, I think, 1 or 2 government officers in that committee. So that committee will draft the rules as we have asked them to do, and then we put up those rules on the internet, on the company, on our website, and we have a 4 to 6 week period where everybody can look at it and give views. And I can assure you that I will try and inculcate and incorporate as many of those views as possible, so that we make this legislation as palatable and as friendly as possible. Because no point in making laws which are going to become more cumbersome for people to comply with, which makes life more difficult for companies to deal with. Idea is to have a law that is going to be successful only if all of you are becoming parts of that. If you become stakeholders in the lawmaking process, I think then you have much more compliance and much more acceptability of the legislation. So the rulemaking committee has already put up some parts of it on the internet. Please look at it, give us your views. I was informed that we have a very inquisitive audience in the cyberspace community. We've had about 80,000 clicks already on the kinds of rules that we made for auditors, for CSR, for other parts of the legislation. So it's going to be an inclusive exercise right from the beginning. And I think that's how we must do lawmaking in this country, where there's proper discussion and debate and openness about what we are looking to do. No legislation affects everyone equally. It will affect some people less positively, less negatively. Perhaps some people don't get affected at all, but it affects people differently. Therefore, it's important for us to listen to everyone, to try and see what can be made possible within the limited elbow room that we have in the rule making. It's also surprising how this whole act has been overtaken by the CSR. Now, the CSR is only one part of the bill, but the corporate social responsibility aspect of the act has become so talked about, which I'm glad. I think it's important that we are reading so much about it, we are talking so much about it. Mostly good stuff. Sometimes I get criticized for pushing it in the way that it was made. Again, this concept is not last month or 1 year old. This has been floating around for years. It has been talked with the industry. It has been talked in the standing committee. Someone asked me, where did this 2% come from? Why not 3%? Why not 1%? And I said to them, I said, look, this was debated for years with the industry, with all the corporate leaders. For government companies, it's 5%. For private companies, it's 2%. Which are the companies that will qualify to do CSR? All of that was discussed umpteen number of times, for months and years together. And the consensus was evolved at 2% of net profit for a certain class of companies. Now, what those companies are is also clearly illustrated in the Act. My intent is to make sure that we get full compliance to this. And CSR is really a wonderful opportunity. It is not about sponsorships. It is not about giving money for events. It's not about getting eyeballs and deriving commercial benefits out of that spend. The idea is to be able to invest that money into communities in which you're operating. It's a tremendous platform for people to endear and to generate the goodwill that is needed today in some parts of our country where there is a perceived trust deficit. Whether it's there or not, I don't know. But the perception is that there is some trust deficit between large corporates, big companies, and the communities in which you're operating. Some of it may be true, some of it may be just media, some of it just hearsay. But we must use all the tools at our disposal to reduce that trust deficit. And by spending this money in any way that you want, the rules for CSR are now on the internet, on the MCA website. Please have a look at them. Even the schedule we put up for discussion to see if you want to expand the scope. And I've left it to the wisdom of the boards to decide what works you should do. Someone suggested we should have a negative list, that the government should say, don't do X, Y, Z things, everything else is CSR. I said, why should we as government or I as minister decide what is good and what is bad? All we've said is, please spend the money in the way that you feel appropriate, that helps the community, helps social development, whether it's for environment, for education, for skill development, for drinking water, for sewage treatment, for making roads, whatever you want to do. That's up to your philosophy of the company. Spend the money, explain what you're doing, and disclose how you're doing it. That's it. There is no certificate required. There is no inspector to go and visit your company and look at your books. There is no NOC required from the government of India. It's your money. You decide how to spend it, where to spend it. It's not a tax. It doesn't come to the government. It's not a cess. I don't collect that money. It's your hard-earned money of the company. You spend it the way you feel appropriate. But please disclose how you're doing it. We have right to information. It's applicable to me. It must be applicable to you. You must decide what is CSR activity. Have the committee go to the board. Let the board in its wisdom decide, yes, this is good CSR work. I'm going to do it. I was in Mumbai a couple of days ago. Somebody asked me a question. If I want to donate money to a church or to a gurdwara or to a temple, I'm invoking God's blessing for my companies. Why can't that be CSR? I said, look, if you can convince your board and you have an AGM and you say that I made a religious donation of 10 lakh rupees and that's CSR, if the board approves it and the AGM approves it, so be it. I won't stand in the way. My view is that no board in this country is going to approve CSR activities which don't look like CSR activities. So we are keeping a completely open mind on what sorts of activities should be allowed in CSR. And keeping it completely open, not restricting the work that people want to do, because different companies have different focus areas. So why should government decide what you have to do? But yes, things like religious donation, political donation, things that are instinctively not looking like CSR, perhaps the board of the various companies will have the same view as I have. So the discretion is with the boards. Please convince your boards, and then you can do whatever you want. Second question I was asked was, if I do skill building in an area, and I spent 5 years investing money, and on the 6th year, that activity starts generating profits, will that still remain CSR? A very good question. I mean, I didn't have an immediate answer to that. I said, well, if you're investing money in opening a school or a college and you spend money, but after 5 or 7 years, that venture starts making money for itself, as long as you put that money back into the same same activity, I suspect that's fine. But if you tell your board that I'm spending 5 rupees and I'm going to make 30% return on investment and make 8 rupees out of it, and I still call it CSR, that's business development. That's not CSR. Again, that's my view, but I leave it to the wisdom of the boards to decide. So we've kept it very open. I don't think it's going to restrict anyone. But yes, I urge the companies that are going to qualify. This is not for small companies or companies that are struggling to make profits, companies that are new to the business environment. Entities that have been here, are entrenched entities, are large companies of 1,000 crores of turnover, etc. For them to spend 2% or invest 2% of their net profit into development of the area that they're operating, I think is something that has now been approved by Parliament. It has got the consent of the people of India through the Parliament, and now it has become law. Let's try and see how best we can contribute to making this a reality. And my own estimates are that if there is full compliance to the CSR legislation as passed by the Parliament, the investment in the social sector could be anywhere between 18 to 25,000 crore rupees every year. That's the kind of money that will go into all the activities that I just illustrated before you. And there's pooling, you can pool together. We as government are only going to be facilitating the things that can be done. To create this set of activities, set of NGOs or your trust or foundations or whatever you choose to use as a tool to reach out. Some companies perhaps don't have the resources to do large projects, that you can have pooling of resources, etc. So we're open to all sorts of suggestions that are coming our way in terms of how to draft the CSR rules. And again, like I said, the rulemaking committee itself has got tremendous representation from the industry chambers. So you will have no shortfall of ideas from the corporate sector. Few other things, we've had a committee, Mr. Damodaran's committee, that has given us a report on how to improve India's ranking, so-called, in the ease of doing business. Now, the World Bank itself has questioned the ranking as to whether they should have a ranking or not, but nevertheless, it's important for us to get a feedback, and the committee has given its report to us about 2 weeks ago. We've examined the report. I think it's a fairly doable few things that he's asked us to do. 2 or 3 things that come to mind straight away. One is that we have a lot of regulators in our country. It's good to have regulations and regulators, but we must also look at what impact those regulators are having. The impact of those regulations must be studied, and we must be able to see how much positivity we are deriving out of it. Mr. Damodaran has also talked about focusing on the SME sector, and something that he's mentioned, I also agree, is that we've got to stop, or at least in the future, not have this retrospective taxation or going back and changing things to tax people for things happening years and decades before, because no investment will happen unless we give a stable tax regime, a policy regime that's long term. Tinkering of it every 3-6 months, 1 year creates uncertainties, and businesses don't like uncertainties. We rather have a fixed policy on what is going to be the roadmap ahead, be very clear and candid, and let the world and the Indian investors know what is the ecosystem in which they're putting their money in. I think India still remains a bankable, safe place for destination of investments. We have a stable political environment, we have a good judicial process, we have sanctity of law, rule of law. Given the global economic situation, India, to my mind, still remains one of those places where people want to invest money. We have a young population that has a lot of consumption capacity. We have all the tools required which make our fundamentals so strong. So we need to keep on that track. The next 6 months to 12 months is going to be a lot of hard work and single-minded, dedicated focus on how to get growth back into our economy. And that will only happen if we get manufacturing a boost, if we give the small and medium-scale enterprises all the help, support, and hand-holding that is required, create a good regulation. The Companies Act, I think, is going to facilitate that moving forward. And I'm certainly of the opinion that we have to be positive. We have to look at creating more opportunities. And growth that does not generate jobs is not what India can afford. We need 15 million new jobs a year for our young people. So when we have GDP growth numbers coming out and we have the economy going forward, we need to have not a jobless growth, but growth that creates jobs for millions of people. So many doctors, lawyers, engineers, architects that we produce need to get absorbed in the work climate that we are producing for our country. Friends, in the end, as a government, we have to be open, flexible, to be able to inspire confidence, and we can do that when we work hand in hand with the Indian corporate sector and all the corporate leaders. So the company law is now getting notified in sequence, and I personally am taking interest to make sure that everyone is abreast of how we are notifying these regulations. The rules are being made with full consultations, and I'm open to receiving any inputs that any of you have, if we need to change something, tweak something, add or subtract, because this law is made for the benefit of our corporate sector so that we as a nation can grow and achieve our fullest potential, at least economically, and then we create a better India, not just for us, but also for our future generations. So thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.